Right. So now we are entering chapter two. We talked about last chapter was virginity reimagined. This new chapter is now going to focus on the art of seduction. And this is indeed a very hot topic. We have so much out there telling us what we can do to seduce somebody. There are so many magazines, so many advertisements, so many books teaching us how to, so many influencers nowadays, right? Teaching us what we ought to do, how we ought to present ourselves, how we ought to behave, even what we ought to wear, what perfumes to pick in order to be seductive and to get the man or the woman that we want. So we are really in a time where we are learning how to market ourselves as products in order to attract attention, to attract love. And so this is where we are today. I'm reminded here of a very famous book by Robert Greene, The Art of Seduction, where he gives precise steps how to seduce, how to, break somebody's defenses, break through their defenses and get them hooked on yourself. So that's really the climate we are in. We are in a climate of self-marketing. There is so much literature out there, so much advice out there on how to seduce somebody. Now, the issue with most of this advice is that it really stems from a place of control. We want to create the persona that will then somehow break through the defenses of the other and get them and acquire them. So there's two things going on. Not only is there the notion of control, how to get that person to fall for us, how to in a way make them fall for us, but there's also the question of dishonesty. In other words, I'm going to put on a persona, adopt a certain attitude, take a certain position, which is not me, and which I'm going to now adopt in order to get you to fall for me. So these type of models that are out there, and I'm thinking specifically, of course, of Robert Greene's Art of Seduction, it's all about embodying one of the 9 archetypes of the seducer, picking your prey, first of all, picking the person who is vulnerable, and then adopting this persona and really playing this role, and then of course acquiring that person. So two issues in my view as an ethicist, right? Which is, as most of you know, I'm a philosopher. I teach ethics. So as an ethicist, I'm reacting to this in 2 ways. I'm seeing here, number one, an element of dishonesty, of posing, and number two, an element of control, of manipulation. But nevertheless, it's still important. It's still an important skill to know how to attract love, how to attract somebody into your life that you have already identified, that you have noticed. So thankfully, we have the Song of Songs with our wonderful character called the Shulamit, this woman who is herself a beautiful seductress. And we're going to see, of course, what we can learn now from the Shulamit, from this biblical text, when it comes to the art of seduction. And what's interesting is that first thing that I found interesting about this story, the Song of Songs, is how effortless seduction actually is and ought to be. This is what many of these books and self-help books on seduction and influencers are ignoring is how naturally seductive each one of us is when we are ourselves, when we are fully ourselves. We're going to talk about this, right? Too often we are so uptight and stressed and anxious and angry and frustrated and resentful that the original light of ourselves is not shining. So but when we are truly at home with ourselves, when we are truly ourselves, we are naturally seductive effortlessly. And this is the first thing that I noticed in the story of the Song of Songs, how effortless seduction is supposed to be. Second thing I noticed, and this is what I'll be focusing on, is that rather than basing seduction on dishonesty, taking on a persona and control, the Song of Songs is going to flip it and base seduction on vulnerability and rest, the ability to rest, to relinquish control. So we're going to look at this. It's a very different approach, but at the same time, in my view, it is an approach which is the one that is most faithful to ourselves and the one that is most respectful of the other. So we're going to see that seduction ultimately is all about respect, self-respect, respect of the other. When we are able to do this well, we become naturally seductive. So let's look a little bit at our Shulamit. And what's interesting about the story of the Song of Songs, we talked already about how progressive the Song of Songs is, how it is in a way, in many ways, a subversion of patriarchy, a subversion of the patriarchal norms. In the context of patriarchy, there's no seductive process. It is the father who identifies with, the other father. The two families identify, a prospect, and then they make an economic arrangement, a business transaction. And then, of course, there's room for consent. The woman or the man can say yes or no. But ultimately, there is no need here for seduction because it is all ultimately a business transaction. So in the context of the Song of Songs, though, we have a woman whose father is absent. She's on her own, like many of us. She doesn't have somebody to make these transactions there. She doesn't live in a context where you can rely on a matchmaker or on parents or on people, to facilitate this for you. She's by herself in the big bad world. And of course, she longs for love. So how is a woman outside of the context of patriarchy to position herself? And we learn here that the Shulamit is herself outside of this context. Of course, she lives in the ancient land of Israel, which is a patriarchal culture, but she is not herself privy to those rules and to this. She is, in a way, very much like us. So let us see how she goes about this. Again, just reminding us, right? This is a text which is a subversion of patriarchy. We have a woman whose love is not arranged. Her love interest, her marriage, her relationship is not arranged by a matchmaker or a father, but rather she is going to take the first step, like many of us. So we see this. It's a beautiful moment. It's like basically the first words that she utters are an invitation. But we're going to see. So in many ways, she's a very modern woman because she is not afraid to take the first step. So let's look at this. If you open the Song of Songs to the very first verse, where she is, in a way, initiating the relationship, which is very, very unusual in the context of patriarchy. And let's see exactly what she says and how she positions herself. I read, I don't have a Bible right here, but let's see if I can find it here in the book. Apologize for this little wait. She says this, chapter 1, verse 1 or 2. Just check your books. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is as sweet as honey. So it begins with a very direct invitation. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Now let's notice, number one, she's not directly addressing the man. She's not speaking to the man. When she says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, she's in a way she's speaking to herself in a way. She's in a way expressing a desire. She's saying, oh, how I long for him to kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And so the first thing we notice is not really an action on the part of the woman towards the man. She's not making a move here. What she's doing, which is very important, which is the beginning of all seductiveness, is connecting to her heart. Everything begins with desire. It starts with a desire that is born within the woman's heart for love in general, and then eventually for a specific person that enters her world. So it all begins with a desire. So I want to stop on this a little bit because it is precisely this desire for love which is going to be the source of our seductiveness as women. And you might say, well, I desire love, but I don't feel seductive. It's not working. Wait, right? Let's look at what that actually means. First thing that is necessary in order to desire love is to actually be connected to your heart and to your desires. How capable are we still as women to connect to our desires? So many of us have so deeply lost touch with our hearts that we don't even know what we want. We are just, like I said in the last chapter, in the last lecture, we are just following a script. We're supposed to get married, so okay, we're looking for a man. Society says we should date, so we're dating, and we're in the grind of doing what is expected of us. But most of us, deep down, sometimes don't even want to be dating. Most of us have lost touch with the heart. And so, the first thing I would invite you to do as women, if you want to be seductive, is to first connect to your heart and listen to what the heart is saying. What is your heart saying? Is your heart saying, let's take a break? Is your heart saying, let's take a rest? Let's not date just yet. Let's process whatever happened last time with the last man, right? Um, how how is your heart responding? What does your heart long for most? And it doesn't have to be love at this point. Many of us have been through heartbreak, and what we really need is rest. What we really need is healing. What we really need is the time to process, to reflect, to gain wisdom, to give grace to the person who hurt us, to forgive, to let go, to this is really what the heart most likely is going to tell you as you begin to tune into your heart. But this is a fundamental step of seduction. And I'm going to explain this because you cannot be seductive if your heart is weighed down by resentment, by fear, by anxiety, by past hurts that haven't been processed. As long as your heart is full of darkness and pain and anxiety and resentment, how can you be seductive? You can put on all the lipstick you want, it's not going to work, right? Seduction comes from within. It's a glow, right? It's a light that shines through. If your heart, however, is weighed down by whatever happened with the last guy and the guy before, how can you be seductive? And so very often the first thing the heart will tell us is, let's take a break from dating. Let's take a rest. Let's process this. And the best way, by the way, to cleanse the heart, if you want to know, right, is to forgive, is to really give grace to the person who hurt you and give grace to yourself for all the stupid mistakes you made, right? There's a, I should one time do a whole video simply on forgiveness, but in a nutshell, it's the idea that yes, you hurt me, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to allow you to change me into someone that I'm not. In other words, I'm not going to allow that pain that you inflicted upon me to make me cold-hearted, to make me resentful, to make me unloving. I'll take the pain, but I'm not going to allow the damage. And so it's really about, when you forgive someone, it's really about refusing for whatever they did to shift you into someone you're not. And it's really choosing love over and over again. There was an ex-boyfriend that deeply, deeply betrayed me. And I remember every 5 minutes I had a, nasty thought about this person. Every 5 minutes I would be like, that loser, how could he possibly do? At one point I got so tired of just thinking about him all day long that I decided to try something which really worked. So I'm going to propose it to you. Every time the thought would come, what a loser, what a jerk, how could he do this to me? I would tell myself, I would sometimes even say it out loud, I don't want to think this, I choose love. Every time the thought would come, I don't want to think this, I choose love. After a while, mysteriously, the thoughts started to space out. In other words, instead of every 5 minutes, it would be every 10 minutes, every half hour. At the end of 3 days, it was every hour. As I continued to do this with every thought, by the time it was 6 months, I was basically filled with love for that person. It was an absolute miracle. By practicing this, choosing love over and over again, it's a kind of a purification of the thinking process, of the emotions. As I was doing this, each time the thought would come, one day all I had for this man was love. And so this is really, perhaps before one can be any type of seductive, one has to cleanse the heart and go through the difficult, arduous process of cleansing it through this choice over and over again, the choice of love. And so once we've done this, once we've come back to a place of love, once we are filled with love for whoever hurt us, we become magnetic. We will attract love because we are filled with love. As long as you're filled with resentment, you will attract someone just like you, and it's not going to work. Right? If you want to attract love, you have to yourself be in a place of love. And this takes time and it takes discipline. But that is probably the first thing your heart will tell you. Let's rest. Let's process. Let's see what we can learn from this. Let's do the difficult discipline of forgiveness. Once you have done this, and once your heart is cleansed, and there is nothing but love in your heart, you will naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously become seductive. Because at that point, you're filled with love, you're filled with light, you're filled with peace. Who can possibly resist such a woman in a world, in a world that we live in? Right? But the key is to continuously cultivate love. Anytime a thought comes that is resentful, that is angry, you want to always realign back to love. And by the way, you don't have to feel love, it's just a choice. Over and over again, you bring yourself back to love. You choose love, even if you don't feel it, even if you don't want to feel it, right? You realign. One day you will actually feel love and you will actually be filled with love. So that's the first step that that the Shulamit actually is teaching us, because when you read about the Shulamit, you see somebody who is utterly devoid of resentment, of anger, of baggage. She's completely, full-heartedly engaged in the relationship. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, there's no past hurts. She's coming with a very pure heart, and that is really the key, the secret of her seductiveness. Of course, that is not enough, because once you've reached a state and you're glowing and you're walking around full of light, at one point that man will cross your path. He will enter into your sphere. And at that moment, there's a huge temptation. At that point, you see there's still some distance between you and that person. And you long to feel the distance. And so, what we're going to do as women, and this is the worst mistake we can make, is to actively try to fill that gap. By making different moves or trying to attract, or we're going to shift from our beautiful seductive state of love and peace into the very unseductive state of anxiety and control. We're going to try to get this man's attention with a lot of effort. We're going to wear a certain thing. We're going to try to be funny. We're going to uh, try to be, maybe appeal to his protective instincts and come up with a sad story about our lives. There's so many ways that we begin to try to control the situation. We're going to make the first move. We're going to call him. We're going to give him our number. When he doesn't call, we're going to do it, right? So there's so many ways that we can ruin the moment by taking active control, by trying to control the situation. And so the most important thing to keep in mind, once you have, of course, come back to a place of love, and that man now is entering your universe, first thing to do at that moment is enter a state of rest. You rest. Like, I'm here, I'm glowing, right? Of course, you can talk to him, you can, whatever is natural and spontaneous, you do, but you don't actively do things. You don't create possibilities. You follow, you go with the flow. Oh, you're invited to go. Oh, sure, I'll come. Right? You enter a place of rest. Now, this is so important because by doing so, you're in a way making room, opening up a space for that man to make his way towards you. And as he actively makes his way towards you, this is when his own desire is going to start to deepen. It's not going to deepen if you're making all the moves. On the contrary, you're going to be asphyxiating. You want to desire, he's got your attention, you like him. When you have natural interactions, you're sweet, right? But you don't really try to get his attention. You create the space for him to make his way towards you, to desire you. As he moves closer, his desire deepens as he takes these risks of taking further steps. This is all helping enlarge his heart, deepen his heart. A man who doesn't have to take steps towards you, his heart remains small. It hasn't been broadened by the risk, by the threat to his ego, right? The threat of rejection. It is to the degree that the man is capable of risking rejection that his heart becomes enlarged and capable of love. If the man has never any risk, the heart remains small. So you want to keep that space open. You don't want to fill it up too fast. I tell my friends usually when they panic, they're like, oh, say they go on a first date and then the guy didn't call back for 2 days and they're like, should I text him? Should I make myself visible? He knows you're there. Don't worry, right? I always tell them this is a very, very broad principle. Less is more when it comes to seduction. Less is always more. You never want to be ostentatious. The truly wealthy, by the way, are not ostentatious. I don't know if you're aware of this. Somebody who's truly rich, you don't know they're rich, right? But somebody who's trying to be rich, right? Who's trying to make their way towards being rich, they're showing off. They have, big cars, huge houses, right? And you can tell that they're not yet rich. Somebody who's likewise a woman who knows her worth, who is truly worthy, doesn't need to go through all this. She knows who she is. It's enough to be, right? So that's the first thing here that we can see when it comes to seduction. Making room for the person to come towards you, which is, by the way, the ultimate sign of respect. In other words, you're making space for the man's agency. He has a choice. He can come towards you or not. But if you throw yourself at him, he will be overwhelmed and there's no choice there, right? He's going to go with the easy path. But by creating the space, you're giving the man time and space to make a decision. Do I want to take the step to choose you? If you throw yourself at the man, there is no moment of choice. And eventually this will become a problem because the man never chose you in the first place, right? Why should he stay? So you want to make sure there's room for that decision, for that choice. You want to wait for the man to, you want to respect the man's agency. So as you can see here, that seduction is also a profound act of respect. Now, what about when the relationship has started, finally, the man said something, you accepted, you responded. Now you are dating. What happens now? What can we do to sustain seductiveness? This is one of the biggest problems that my students encounter. They tell me, oh, at first was wonderful, everything was great. It was exciting, we were passionate, we were madly in love with each other. And then after 2 or 3 years, now the relationship is kind of stale, it's kind of boring, it's stagnant, we're not getting anywhere. And it's at this moment, by the way, and we'll see this in the next chapter, that the temptation of infidelity, right, begins to appear, right? You start as a man or as a woman to see other people who are more interesting, or maybe more caring, more exciting, and you start to wonder, well, maybe this is the end. Maybe the relationship has run its course. So the moment you want there has to be a key to keeping the relationship flowing, alive, moving, so that it doesn't become stagnant. And again, this will be possible through a connection to desire. You see, I tell a lot of my students, the relationship has to keep flowing. You always need to get to the next level. As soon as you get stuck in a level, maybe the level of the first 3 years where everything is fun, exciting, there's no responsibility, no commitment, it's just great. If you don't move to the next level of commitment, of responsibility, of care for the other, your relationship is going to stagnate and eventually it will fizzle out. And so it's very important to move from stage to stage, to continuously allow the relationship to follow its course, to not block yourself in one particular stage. And the mistake many people make, because they're afraid of commitment, because they're afraid of, because perhaps they don't want to relinquish their freedom, is they just want the first 3 years. They don't realize that this will fizzle out if you don't move to the next level. And so the key here to moving to the next level is very often the female desire. It is very often the woman who senses when it is the time to go into a deeper mode, into the next level. Her desires are in many ways um, the how do I put it, the internal guidance system of the relationship. We have forgotten this as women. Again, we saw this in the last chapter, that women have been taught that their emotions don't matter, that they're hormonal or hysterical, that their emotions are out of control. And so we've been taught to remain disconnected from how we feel. We've also been taught to neglect our desires. We have been taught to be selfless, to be sacrificial, to submit to the male desire. You have religious texts which talk about the woman needing to submit to the man and the man needing to lead. This is not in tune with the female psychology, because the female psychology in her desires is actually the true internal guidance system of the relationship. The man cannot lead unless he has a direction. We offer that direction, right? So to a woman, therefore, is so important that she remain, as the relationship is unfolding, connected to her desires. What do you want at this point? Do you long for more time together? Do you long for maybe a stronger commitment? Do you long to meet his family? Do you long for marriage? Would you like a child? Right? These are not just selfish desires. These are desires that are that constitute the lifeline of the relationship. These desires, as they are being responded to, are going to nourish, strengthen, and deepen the relationship. And so, as women, we have to be incredibly in tune with our desires, because our desires are wisdom. They are the wisdom that the relationship needs to sustain, to last, right? In first 3 years, there's no wisdom necessary, it just happens. we are given this beautiful gift of chemistry, and everything is happening by itself. But eventually, the relationship there needs to be a craftsmanship in order to sustain the relationship. And it begins with an attunement to the internal guidance system of the relationship, which is the female desire. And so never, never neglect those desires. The desires are what will sustain, what will safeguard, what will protect, what will strengthen, what will consolidate the relationship. Now, the problem with us is some of us are very much in tune with our desires. And the problem that will arise then, once, for those of us who are in tune, is the way that we express those desires. Too often, the woman is going to become very, very, what's the word? She will pontificate about her desires. In other words, instead of simply expressing the desire, she's going to express an ultimatum, or she's going to express, anxious nagging or criticism or a threat. Um, I have a friend, um, back in the day. She was a gorgeous Puerto Rican girl. She had amazing, beautiful, curly blonde hair, green eyes. She was drop dead gorgeous. And there was this man that was turning around her, and they were sort of dating, but he wasn't really making any. There was no clarity in the way that he was approaching her. After a few months, she got very, very exasperated, and she told him straight up, and I quote, either you commit or you're out of my life. I mean, the man panicked. He was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose this woman. So he came to her, he brought her a big bouquet of flowers. He's like, yes, I'm committing. A month later, he was gone, right? The way that she expressed the desire was an ultimatum. You can't see, the thing is, we have to understand this as women. We cannot control the man. The man is not an object that we can control. The man is there's a wildness to man that we have to respect. Just like we want them to respect our agency, we have to respect their agency. When you express a desire in a way that exerts pressure, whether it's in the form of a criticism or nagging or an ultimatum, you are in a way in not creating that space, right, for the man to choose to respond. So it's very important once you have that desire to simply express it as a desire, and then, very important, to wait. To wait, whatever it takes, for that man in his own time, in his own way, to respond to your desire. There again, you're opening up that space of seduction. Remember, seduction is born out of two things: desire and space. It's like building a log fire, right? When you have the logs, you have the matches. This is all very important. But if you don't have the space between the logs, if everything is together like this, the fire can't keep going. The fire is, in a way, being kept alive through the space, through the oxygen that flows through that fire. Is the same with seduction. You always want to have a desire. That's your fire. That's your matches. But you also want to create the space for that fire to take. And so as a woman, you have a desire, but always you're now going to wait for the man to either, come to you or respond to your desire. And so that's what is so difficult to do as women, because our desires matter. We know they matter. We want them to have them. This is internal wisdom. But we have to have the respect for the man, for their agency, for the freedom to act. It's interesting because, and very often, by the way, a man will respond positively to a desire that is expressed in this respectful way. I have a friend of mine who once told me, it was a revelation to me. He said, a woman can ask anything of a man, and he will do it. It all depends on the tone that she uses to express that desire. And I was amazed, because I don't know, I somehow imagine men don't listen, right? I didn't know there was a way to speak that men could listen. And he revealed that to me, right? He said, it's the tone. You can ask for anything. And it's incredible because the Shulamit, by the way, is incredibly, incredibly attuned to this. This woman is so good at expressing her desires in a non-threatening way. Um, I mean, she asks for the moon. It's the things she has. So initially she initiates the relationship, so she's asking now for love. Then later on she's going to be asking for more time, and then she longs for commitment. Eventually she's even going to propose to this man. She's going to ask him in marriage. So she's really absolutely audacious when it comes to the expression of her desires. But what's powerful about the Shulamit is that there is never an ounce of negativity associated with these desires. In other words, she's never anxious. I mean, she's anxious, she longs for the man, but she's never trying to pressure the man into fulfilling her desires. She's never giving ultimatums. There are no threats, there's no resentment, there's no frustration, simply the desire, open-hearted desire. And then, and this is her genius in my view, joyful expectation of what will come her way. The Shulamit is filled with joy. Even though there's so much that causes her pain in the story, she remains hopeful. She remains grateful. And she remains in the stance of joyful expectation of what is going to come next, without trying to control what, when, who. That's the beauty of the Shulamit. And so we can see here that the art of seduction actually is very simple. You don't have to do much. First of all, the cleansing of the heart, taking time to rest, taking time to give the heart rest so that the heart can recover, so that the heart can heal. And then when that man comes your way, continuing to rest. Of course, you're not going to be, hiding in a corner. You can talk to him. You can, you can even find a way to sit where he sits or whatever. All of this is very subtle. But at the same time, you're resting, you're giving space for him to make his journey towards you. And ultimately, of course, when you're more in the relationship, again, practicing this rest, knowing that your desire is wise, expressing it, and then, of course, waiting, right, for the man to respond. Now, the seduction works for the man too. I want to say just a few words in conclusion as to how the man also can learn to seduce in this way. So when it comes to, of course, the first moments of seduction, when you're trying to get the person's attention, it's kind of the same system. Again, you want to create that space. You have that, you want to show interest, right? But you want to do it in a way that keeps that space open, that distance for the woman's desire to grow for you, to for her to begin to develop feelings for you. So you don't want to rush into it, make an inappropriate, touch, or force her, force yourself into her life, or give her a big. I have a friend. He was priceless. He didn't know he didn't know this clearly. Each time he would be attracted to a woman, he would go to her within weeks and confess his love, his undying love for her. That woman would just want to run away. So, in the end, he finally got married. So he probably mastered it at some point. But this is the temptation for the man, is to rush into and to move too fast. And again, when you do that, you feel that distance necessary for the woman to develop feelings for you. She might not have noticed you right away. She needs time maybe for you to grow on her, right? So I will give you an example, very concrete example. Suppose you're attracted by a girl in the classroom, whatever. I'm talking to my students. What can you do without being too forward? Well, maybe instead of giving her your number, which is definitely you're showing romantic interest, you can maybe invite her to a study group, or, try to just talk to her, and then eventually find out what she likes. And maybe then always, the first move should always be non-threatening. You always want to invite her in a group with other people where she could think, oh, is he being friendly or is there more? Just keep her not knowing at first, because that gives her time to refocus on you, to for her feelings to develop. You never want to be. Now, what you want to do then, once you've made your move, is wait. How does she respond? Does she respond? If she doesn't respond, you need to take a little time and then maybe try again. If she responds, now you can go to the next level. After the group, maybe you can say, hey, how about we get coffee? Very non-threatening, not dinner yet. And little by little, as she responds to you, you always want to wait for that response. It's a dance. You become more and more forward, but you never want to rush into it, because what this does is it destroys the space necessary for the desire to grow. As you are moving towards each other, that oxygen is intensifying the desire, right? And the same goes once you're in a relationship, right? The woman now has her internal guidance system, is trying to give direction or consolidation to the relationship. Learn to be in tune with that woman. That woman will save your life. Right? And so many men don't even hear the voice of their women. The woman expresses something, and they want to do things their way. They don't want their freedom to be impeded. They want to, right? They feel like that desire is somehow impeding on their freedom. There is no truer freedom than the freedom of giving yourself to another, than the freedom of loving another fearlessly. And as you respond to someone's desires, you are in a way freeing that part of you, which is otherwise shut up, right? Imprisoned in a very solitary life. There is freedom in offering up oneself to another, in granting favors to another. This is what the king does, right? The king is not over here, playing video games. The king grants favors, right? So there's a shift from prince to king. The prince is over here, living his life, riding his horse, whatever, enjoying himself. The king, on the other hand, there's an element of granting, of hearing and granting, which is what brings a man to maturity, is the ability to give of himself rather than just taking, right? So there's a freedom, there is a liberation here of there's a maturation, a blossoming of the man in the gift of self that you don't have if you stay in a situation of just taking. So an invitation here to hear the voice of your woman, and and take it seriously, and then try to respond to it the best you can. So in summary, right, seduction, natural, and it comes with desire, and also with a space for the person to respond to our desire. Okay, I hope this helped you. What we're going to look at in the next chapter is a much darker chapter, is going to be entitled The Dark Night of Infidelity. And I will see you there in a bit.